The American election is over, and Donald Trump was elected as president to serve a second term. Now that the dust is settling, it's important to look at the geopolitical ramifications and implications of a Donald Trump second term. I know the rest of the world is ready for a second term, but there are lots of geopolitical conflicts that would adversely affect Africa. And is Africa prepared for a Donald Trump second term? In this presentation, I will discuss the implications of a Donald Trump second term on Africa as a whole. So there are conflicts that would directly impact Africa. One is the Ukraine conflict, and we know Russia will be emboldened to move further into Ukraine, and that shift will dramatically change the outcome of that conflict. And if Russia were to occupy greater parts of Ukraine, it's going to spill into tensions in Europe that would impact global economy, and Africa would be impacted. The Israeli-Hamas conflict, we know it's going to escalate, and there is not going to be a ceasefire in the near future. So what does that bode for Africa as it relates to the shift in policies that may come? Well, it may lead to higher petroleum prices and other economic and financial issues that would impact Africa. The Israeli-Lebanon conflict will escalate, probably into a full-scale ground war. And we know there are lots of Africans who are in Lebanon serving as domestic workers. In particular, from Sierra Leone, we know there is a host of domestic workers and mainly women who are now abandoned in the streets of Lebanon. And what would that mean if the Israeli-Lebanon goes into ground conflict into southern Lebanon, where most of these workers are located? It's going to bode significant impact on Africa as a whole because the domestic workers are mainly from Africa. So these are all implications and ramifications of a Donald Trump win and would directly impact Africa. So to understand all of this, let us look at the current US Department's African strategy, that focuses on three core objectives, and see how these core objectives are aligned with the incoming second term Donald Trump policy. So the first one is advancing trade and commercial ties with key African states to increase US and African prosperity. Let's pause on that one and discuss it a little bit. We know what Donald Trump thinks of Africa. He thinks of African countries as asshole countries. Do you think for a moment that this strategy and this objective would be aligned with the Trump second term presidency? I do not believe so. Because the key word in this strategy is to increase ties with key African states, to increase African and US prosperity. It's not going to happen. And I'm going to guarantee you that the African summit that President Biden put in place will be dismantled. And during the next second term presidency of Donald Trump, there will not be a single African summit policy to bring African leaders to the White House. The message is clear that Africa will not be at the table. And as we say, if you are not at the table, you are the menu or you are part of the menu. So Africa and Africans, we know, would be part of this menu. So let's continue to the second strategy of the departments, US Department, African strategy. The second calls for protecting the United States from cross-border health and security threats. Let's read that again. Protecting the USA from cross-border health and security threats. So there are many ways that different administrations have addressed this issue. Some of them have done it through USAID. Some of them have done it through health and vaccinations. Some of them have done it through building hospitals. And some of them have put in measures to ensure that infections like dysentery, cholera, Ebola, and all of those things could be minimized as threats to the US because we know people travel between countries of Africa to the United States. But if you could juxtapose that with the platform of Donald Trump when he ran this election and why he was elected by those who voted for him, he made it clear that Africans and immigrants bring diseases and health crises to Americans. That immigrants, they poison the blood of Americans. Okay? And that immigrants eat the cats and dogs of the people that live here. So you could see how this would impact that second strategy. So one way you could minimize cross-border health is to close down immigration. And we are going to see a significant cuts as it relates to visas to African countries, visas to Africans, and probably the reduction and elimination of the DV visas to African countries under the second Trump administration. Because this is what he campaigned on, was not to bring immigrants to this country and immigrants who are going to poison the blood of Americans and immigrants who are going to bring diseases and health crises to the United States. And under this policy, we're going to see mass deportations of Africans. He's made it clear that the Congolese, that do represent Africa, will be the first group to be deported out of this country. We know he's going to eliminate all future temporary protected status for Africans, an African country. And most Africans who are under applications for refugee status and other political asylums, we know will be denied. So folks, the implications for Africa is really great. Your brothers and sisters who are going through the process may be coming home soon, and you would see it happen in very large numbers. And the rules relating to becoming naturalized citizens for immigrants in general, and probably for Africans in particular, will be changed to make it more stringent and more difficult for Africans to be naturalized citizens of the United States of America. He's also stated that immigrants come here to take the jobs of Americans. That's why Americans don't have jobs. So for those of you who are highly qualified in the field of nursing, in the field of technology, in the field of cybersecurity and those issues, no, you're not coming to the United States under Donald Trump, because that was the platform. That was the platform for his campaign. And he says immigrants commit a high crime. And so the only way you could appease your base, those who voted for you, is to make sure you minimize the intake of immigrants into this country. So who's more likely to be affected? Is it the European immigrants Is it Chinese immigrants? Is it Australian immigrants? Is it Canadian immigrants? Is it South American immigrants? Or is it African immigrants? The African immigrants are most likely to be on this menu and will be affected the most. So let's look at the third strategy for the department's focus on Africa. It reads supporting key African states' progress towards stability. Supporting key African states towards progress towards stability. There's been a fight in South Sudan and Sudan and in other African countries, giving the platform of the current President-elect Trump that starts on January 20th, 2025. Stability and democracy will not be a priority for the next administration. Don't forget, stability for an asshole country is not as valuable and will not be a priority for his base that is trying to protect the stability of African countries. So what are the implications for that? What are the implications for that? So we're going to see a lot of implications that would affect Africa. One, we're going to see the decimation of democracy across the African continent. That now there is not the bully pulpit of the United States to say, hey, in key countries, we want to see this democracy. It will not be the priority of the president of the United States to ensure that democracy takes a foothold in Africa when we've had issues with democracy relating to that. Now, let us remember that it is the president of the United States that appoints the ambassador to a country through the State Department. So let's take Sierra Leone, for example. We have Ambassador Hunt. He was appointed by the Biden administration to serve as ambassador in Sierra Leone. The Biden administration, as one of their key issues on number 3 to protect stability in a country, went into the tripartite between the SLPP, APC, and international partners. The Biden administration put up the money required for the tripartite to move forward. For 1 second, do you think that the new US Department of State policy towards Sierra Leone would be top on the agenda for stability? The answer is no. So what would happen to the tripartite? I guarantee it is as dead as it can be. And the moment they change the ambassador, which would happen early in January or February of 2025, the tripartite will no longer cease to exist. Sierra Leone will be on the menu and will not be at the table. And going to be on the menu also is the MCC. The 400 million that was aligned with the tripartite to ensure stability in the country will not be a priority of the Trump administration and will never surface again, probably in the State Department. So we could say that tripartite is dead and we could wave goodbye to the MCC 400 million. Because Donald Trump campaigned on the fact that the Biden administration is giving money to immigrants who are coming into the country and leaving Americans to suffer. Let me repeat that the Biden administration was giving monies away to non-Americans. And that 400 million from the MCC would be considered giving money away to non-Americans. So Sierra Leone, wave goodbye to that. You will not see a single penny And even if it is approved under the Biden administration, it's going to be revoked under the second-term Trump administration. So you could see that now Africa is going to be on the menu and not at the table. And the American first policy on which Trump ran his election is based on America first, America only, and nationalism. And when you promote the American first policy and nationalism, you don't take care of others. You take care of your own. However, as it relates to the African policy, you would gradually see a resurgence of policies towards South Africa to represent a symbol of African policies, all because of Elon Musk, who is from South Africa and who was able to put $75 million and almost give $1 million a day for folks to register as part of the sweepstake to support Donald Trump. So would Africa as a whole benefit? No. Would South Africa be the symbol of African policies? Yes. So that remains to be seen, and that will be part of the whole. So there are several implications that would affect Africa. For economically, there will be no more unlimited aid given to Africa from the second Trump administration. No monies will come just because of the sake of it. Democracy in Africa will be significantly impacted. We're going to see the rise of new dictators in countries where we had marginal democracy. We're going to see the rise of human rights violation, and these dictatorial powers will be unchecked because America used to be the big brother, and from the bully pulpit to check on these African leaders because of funds being given to them. So with no money coming in, with limited resources to support this government, we're going to see more civil conflicts and unrest. And the rise probably of military coups in sub-Saharan Africa. And who is going to check them? No one is going to check them for the next 4 years because it is no longer America's business to keep those three strategies in place. And so Africans, you have to wake up. Africa as a continent needs to wake up. You see, the EU is way stronger now than they were during the first term of Donald Trump's presidency. It was unpredictable during the first term, and now they have the playbook for the second term. So EU, the European Union, they know what to do. China knows what to do. Russia, they have the playbook. They know what to do. South America, they understand what the policies are as it relates to immigrants coming through Mexico into America. The border will be closed. There will be no policies to encourage immigrants to come into the country. So Africa, where do you stand? A country like Sierra Leone, from where I come from, where do you stand right now? You stand nowhere. You have no place at this table. You're going to be part of the menu, and probably you have to choose whether you are part of the appetizer, or whether you are part of the entree, or you are part of the dessert, because you have no more choice. You've waited and unprepared for this moment, and it's going to significantly impact the entire Africa, and especially a country like Sierra Leone that has been handing out, waiting, reaching, asking for MCC 400 million. Now the ball is in our court. Could Africa come together to make sure they're better prepared for the second Trump administration? I don't think so. So the economic conflict, the political conflict, the socio-psychological conflicts that would ensure, and the lack of invitation from the Trump administration to an African summit, because Africa or African countries are considered asshole countries, right now is going to be the reality of Africa. I rest my case.